Rachel Malis with this week's Raiders 60 on WSURaiders.com. We have a lot in store for you this week. We'll take a look at this past week's highlights of men's and women's soccer, women's volleyball, women's tennis, cross country, swimming, and softball. We'll also hear from women's basketball head coach Mike Bradbury discussing this week's first practice of the season. Now, here's a look at last week's highlights and results.
Last Tuesday, volleyball took on Bowling Green as they lost 3-0 to the Falcons. Set number 1 was 28-26, set number 2, 25-12, set number 3, 25-23. Heidi Splinter had 11 kills and Elena McAuley had 10 kills as the Raiders dropped the match 3-0 to the Bowling Green Falcons. Last Friday, volleyball would travel to Valparaiso to take on the Crusaders in Horizon League play. The Raiders would drop the match 3-0 to Valparaiso. Set number 1 was 25-12, 25-14 was set number 2, and set number 3 was 25-16. Elena McAuley led the way with 8 kills, and Heidi Splinter had 7. The Raiders would wrap up the weekend at UIC and drop set number 1, 25-20, set number 2, 25-23, and set number 3, 25-23. Elena McAuley led the way with 13 kills, Heidi Splinter with 10. Raiders will lose 3-0 to UIC.
And here's a look at volleyball's upcoming matches this week. And now here's a look at this week's past highlights and results of men's soccer.
Last Tuesday, the men's soccer team would take on Cleveland State. Goal coming from Justin Laird, the first goal of the game, assist from Bryce Rockwell Ashton. Then Cleveland State would score to tie it up at 1-1. No score to happen in regulation, and we'll head to overtime. And the Raiders would win it off of a penalty kick from Derek Zuniga. And that would be the only goal the Raiders would need, and they'll win it 2-1 over Cleveland State.
Raiders win it overtime 2-1.
Then Wright State would wrap up the weekend against Xavier. First goal coming off of the Xavier's own player, and in the back of the net, Raiders up 1-0 against the Musketeers. The Raiders' second goal would come in the first half from an assist from Kenji Goldman, as Brian Cawthorn calling for it and scored his first goal of the season. The Raiders up 2-0 against Xavier. And then Xavier would get one back off of a free kick to make it 2-1. And then Xavier would tie it 2-2 off the penalty kick. Then go up 3-2 and win the game off another penalty kick. Xavier wins it 3-2 against Wright State.
And here's a look at this week's upcoming events for men's soccer. And now here's a look at last week's women's soccer highlights and results.
Last Saturday, the Wright State women's soccer team would take on Horizon League foe Milwaukee. Raiders would lose 3-1 against Milwaukee. Milwaukee scoring 1 goal in the first and 2 in the second. Raiders get 1 goal from Brittany Prasad, her 3rd goal of the season. Assist coming from Aisha King.
And now here's a look at upcoming women's soccer events. Here's a look at the results from last week's cross-country meet. Here's a look at last week's swim meets. Here's a look at last week's women's tennis fall shootout against UD. And here's a look at the upcoming events for women's tennis. Here's a look at men's golf for this week. And now here's women's basketball head coach Mike Bradbury as he discusses the first practice of the new season.
Yeah, today was our first day. It was nice to get them all out there together and kind of get after it a little bit. I was excited about our effort and our energy, and how they approach things, from a mental standpoint. Physically, I think we're in pretty good shape, so I was more interested in us going more than an hour and see how they'd be able to handle it mentally. Yeah, it's interesting, and we try and keep them mixed up as much as possible, but we do have a lot of new people, and they're working really hard and learning quickly, and hopefully they'll continue to do that. We've got 4 weeks before we play, so we got some time and won't have to rush everything.
This has been your Raider 60 update with Rachel Malis. We'll see you next week.